I never had a panic attack in my whole life until a few weeks after my first child was born. I was on the floor, hyperventilating and crying. If you asked me why, I couldn't tell you. This is the postpartum depression iceberg. This is where we discuss the causes and contributing factors of postpartum depression, which is a condition that strikes women in innumerable ways during the postpartum period. Firstly, I'd like to apologize for the audio quality in some parts of this video. I was luckily able to re-record most of it, but some parts are going to sound like I'm recording on a flip phone. PPD is an uncomfortable and confusing thing to talk about. It comes with feelings of guilt and shame, constantly asking yourself, how could I possibly feel this way? Shouldn't I be happy? I just had a baby, for f***'s sake. I don't know why it was censored. I said for Frank's sake. I didn't say for Pete's sake, because I know a guy named Pete. That would be kind of offensive, you know? In total, there are 3 tiers, and each tier has several sections. The iceberg starts at the tip, which are the most obvious and see the most light of day. As we get deeper into the lower tiers, we find the depths of this issue that may be completely unknown or otherwise too frightening to ever talk about. So be sure to stay till the end to find out what the last one is. And for the sake of time, I'm not going to mention factors of PPD that also may be factors of depression outside the context of postpartum, although they may be factors as well. My experience with this is very limited. I'm only a few years into motherhood myself, but I have experienced PPD after having each of my 2 kids, and I also have friends who've experienced PPD as well. Also, this video is not exhaustive, so I'd really appreciate anyone who can provide further insights in the comments. This video is meant to be the start to a conversation about this topic. And if you can relate to any of these experiences, it doesn't mean you have PPD. I'm not diagnosing anyone, and this video is not a diagnostic tool. Also, I just want to clarify that childbirth, pregnancy, and motherhood are the most empowering and beautiful things that a woman will ever experience. And despite all that I've been through with PPD, I would never take any of it back. Before we start, hello, my name is Deirdre and I'm a Catholic stay-at-home mom. I make these videos for fun. It is my creative outlet in between wiping boogers and bums. I like to make content about my faith and mental health and sometimes how those overlap. So if you're interested in that, then please hit subscribe. Tier 1. Commonly known and talked about, but we won't spend too long on these. Not because they're not important, but they simply don't need much explanation. Physical changes. Since birthing your baby and also growing them inside your body will not be the same. In fact, it's very likely that your body will not go back to the way that it was before. This can be quite jarring, and it can come with some degree of body dysphoria. In addition to this, after giving birth, there's a huge shift in estrogen once the placenta has left your body. This sudden loss of estrogen can sometimes contribute to what is called the baby blues. Sometimes this can escalate into PPD, although it usually doesn't as far as I know. Some women will eat their placenta after they've given birth so that they're incorporating small amounts of that estrogen back into their body and kind of taking the edge off the emotional roller coaster. I personally did this after my second baby was born. I didn't notice a huge difference. Anxieties. If you're anything like me, before you had your own baby, you did not know anything about babies. In fact, you did not even know how to hold a baby. By the way, did you know that there are YouTube videos about how to hold your baby? Don't ask me how I know that. Another anxiety trigger for new moms is the strong desire to do the right thing and the fear of doing the wrong thing. Now, I would put right and wrong in quotation marks there, not because there aren't right and wrongs to certain situations. We kind of make ourselves believe that there are when it really doesn't matter. Interestingly enough, a lot of these decisions and big choices have to do with either food or sleep. And so many things can drive you nuts. Another thing that can drive you nuts is that babies cry a lot. And I mean a lot. Also, once you have a baby, you will get no sleep anymore. In fact, just say goodbye to sleep altogether. Just kidding, you will sleep, but not if your baby has colic. If a baby has colic, statistics show that there is a high chance that the mother will develop PPD at some point. Your baby is in pain and crying a lot, and sometimes all you can do is hold your baby so that they're not crying in pain alone. But don't worry, your hearing will eventually return and everything will eventually stop sounding like you're underwater. Lack of support. We all know it takes a village to raise a child, but it's really tough if you don't have a village, or if your family and friends live far away, or they simply can't prioritize the time for you. Also, with a baby in the mix, you don't get a lot of downtime with your spouse. The last point in this tier I don't think really hits you until you're experiencing it. But the life you previously knew is now over. Tier 2. These are less widely discussed or acknowledged contributors to PPD. If you're a parent, you've probably heard of these, but if you're not, you might not have heard of these issues before. Nursing issues. Nursing is so important, not just physically, but physiologically and mentally and emotionally for that little baby. Nursing is God's way of allowing that little baby to maintain that intimacy and closeness to their mother's body that they spent so long inside. And unfortunately, some women cannot breastfeed. It can be heartbreaking. They might feel like a failure, they might feel distant from their baby, or they may feel shame for formula feeding, even though sometimes that's all that they can do. Some women can accomplish combination feeding, or they can use different technologies that allow formula feeding at the breast, but sometimes those are not accessible or affordable, and combination feeding can be quite complicated and stressful at times. Panini nonsense. If you had a baby between the years 2020 and 2022, you can relate to the panini nonsense. At one point, the government where I lived made it a public health policy that I couldn't have people in my private home to help me out with my baby. Well, that's quite unfortunate when you are fighting off suicidal thoughts and you are home alone with a baby that won't stop crying. P.S. Did you know that babies actually sleep better and cry less when they are exposed to new faces and places because it stimulates their little brains so they actually end up getting tired and have a nice deep sleep? That would have been really inconvenient if the government suddenly told you that you couldn't take your baby out to public places, and anytime you left the house, everyone around you was wearing pieces of cloth on their face. That would have been really inconvenient. And don't even get me started on giving birth during this awful time period. I did not have it as bad as other women did, but countless mothers and fathers experienced birth trauma due to the absolutely ridiculous panini policies in hospitals and by healthcare providers, like having to labor with a mask on, or not having your doulas present at the birth, or not having the father of the baby present at the birth, and the worst of all, having your baby tested for the panini before being placed in your arms after they're born. Disgusting. It's disgusting. On that note, traumatic birth. It's something that's completely out of our control, but it can really leave us with a scar when it doesn't go to plan. And it can really affect the way you bond with your baby. Bonding is super important because it releases oxytocin, a feel-good hormone. It does a lot of other things, but that's not for this video. And some women have zero desire to hold their babies at all after they're born, and that is a huge red flag that something is not clicking the way it should. On the note of bonding as well, some babies have health complications and they need to stay in the NICU for some time immediately after birth, and they don't get all of that crucial bonding time. And their parents may experience PTSD or PPD after the fact. Sometimes giving birth while on pain meds can hinder bonding as well. This isn't the case for all women. In fact, this is very rare that this happens. But it is a known phenomenon with mammals that when they give birth without feeling the pains of labor, they will abandon their child instead of caring for them. I personally experienced this on a very small scale. No, I did not abandon my child. But when I gave birth to my first baby, I had an epidural. After the fact, we took her home and I just was looking at her and thinking, I feel like you're not my baby. But it only lasted like a day and it was just this weird, confusing feeling that I had. For some women, they don't plan on using pain medication, but they end up using them because they need to in the end. They might feel like a failure, or they might feel guilty, or, blame themselves for something that's out of their control. And it might bring a lot of disappointment. C-sections can come with a whole lot more of that too. Moms who give birth via C-section are sometimes told ridiculous things, like they didn't actually give birth to their baby or they didn't even do any hard work. Well, if anyone out there is a mom who gave birth via C-section, I just want to tell you that you absolutely gave birth to your child and don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise.
I couldn't imagine the hard work that a woman has to do for a C-section birth. Credit to you, mamas. Any of these factors underneath this section, birth trauma, can contribute to trauma, including flashbacks, nightmares, and fear of another baby. But it might not always lead to trauma. It might just result in disappointment.
Our first baby's birth took a scary and unexpected turn. I didn't find it traumatic myself, but my husband carried trauma of that experience as he had to witness it all in fear of something going wrong and losing me or the baby. Neither of us knew that he had unaddressed trauma until I was in labor with my second baby. But by the grace of God, he came through, and thank God, because we ended up having an accidental, unassisted birth. And he did an awesome job.
Modern motherhood. I'm squeezing this one in as I'm editing. It's not something that everyone knows about, but once you become a parent, it becomes increasingly evident. Motherhood is not at all what it used to be, and it is so much harder in this modern world. Stay-at-home wives are a rarity nowadays. Modern society has thrust any and all women into the working world. Back in the day, you could go next door and leave your kids with neighbors so that you can have a breather, or your mother, your mother-in-law, sisters, aunties would come help with chores and housework. And if you live in a city like me, you will experience the urban sprawl. The closest that either my own or my husband's parents live is 30 minutes away from us. We don't live in a family-oriented society where there are young girls down the block who are willing to give time and volunteer just to spend time with children. It just doesn't happen like that anymore. Tier 3. Shame from your children witnessing your depression. Meta. I know. This was the case for me after having my second baby. First, imagine having an uncontrollable panic attack while your newborn is crying in their bassinet. Now, imagine that same thing, but you also have a toddler. The first scenario now suddenly seems like a walk in the park.
It is so awful to feel that your mental health is hurting or traumatizing your child. You feel shame and blame towards yourself even though there's absolutely nothing you could do about it. Honestly, if you could do something about it, you would. It's just not that simple. And it's not your fault. Your kids will be okay, I promise.
Erasure from society. I want to start this section off with an ad from a local political party's campaign that sums up this idea perfectly. So yeah, their premise is that you can't participate in society if you have a baby. So they're gonna hand out hormone pills like candy so that you don't have a baby.
Excuse me? What about the moms? Who? Like the moms who have babies? If they didn't have a baby, they could have participated in society. Last time I checked, we literally make society. We give birth to society. Guess who I'm not voting for? The unfortunate truth is that our modern society severely undervalues and ignores mothers. One thing I didn't expect from motherhood was to be excluded from society in so many ways.
You may notice that friends stop talking to you after you've had a baby, or friends and family stop inviting you to events because you have a baby. You learn that becoming a mom has devalued you in the eyes of other people. So not only are you exhausted and tired from a thankless job, but you are also rewarded by being discluded and forgotten by your friends and family. Pregnancy and birth are no joke. Your body works harder than it ever has before, and it's quite common for your organs or your nutrition levels to be set off by this. It's quite well known in the medical world today that vitamin D and B12 and good probiotics are essential for good mental health. When you're low on these, it's very common to feel sad. Something less talked about is almost all women's thyroid function will drop due to the exhaustion after birth. When this happens, it can cause symptoms of depression in every way that you can imagine. Did you know if your liver is overwhelmed, then it will not properly break down and convert estrogen? When this happens, bad estrogens will win over the good, and the bad estrogens actually function more similarly to testosterone, and this causes postpartum rage. This is what I really struggled with big time. I had ridiculously uncontrollable and unreasonable anger and aggression that came out by throwing furniture, ripping up papers, and snapping pencils in half, snapping cutting boards in half. Thank God I never hurt anyone, and thank God I was able to get my hormones back to manageable levels. I'm not planning on making a video talking about the supplements that I've taken to get where I'm at now, but if enough people show interest, then I will consider it. For the record, pretty much everyone has an overwhelmed liver to some degree. We've virtually all eaten food sprayed with glyphosate, so you don't need to be super unhealthy or drink a lot for that to happen. It's not your fault. On a hopeful note, many women have experienced lessened symptoms of PPD when they receive progesterone injections. The data looks quite reassuring on this, but unfortunately it's hard to find a doctor who will actually give it to you.
I think the physical and physiological factors of PPD are highly underrated. We'd like to think nowadays that we have better awareness and understanding of mental health, but I don't think that's the truth at all.
We don't treat PPD as a bodily issue. We treat it as a mind issue or an issue of your own will with mind-altering drugs or therapy. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes that is what people need, but if you've ever stopped to ask yourself, why do I feel this way? I have so much going for me in my life, there's no reason for me to feel this way. It's probably a bodily issue.
I was on sertraline for about 7 months after my first baby was born, and to tell you the truth, I honestly don't remember very much about her babyhood. I don't regret it because I truly believed it stopped me from hurting myself at the time. But I kind of would like to experience life instead of just floating through it while being numb. I don't know. Is that just me? Now we're about to get to the final point here, but before I do, I just want to let you know that I put this video together with the intention of helping others in a similar position to me feel like they are not alone and know that they are seen and heard in their experiences. Now, if this video has done that thus far for you, or if you don't have PPD but you want other people to become more aware of it, then please hit that like button because it tells YouTube that this is a good video and that it should be shown to more people.
Now at the very bottom of the iceberg, we have postpartum depression for men. An iceberg in an iceberg. PPD is a taboo and uncomfortable thing to talk about as it is, and men already have a difficult time talking about their feelings. How's that for obscure and unaddressed? Men can experience PPD too, in some ways similar to women, in some ways not. Remember how I said my husband experienced trauma from the birth of our first baby and I didn't? It's because he had to watch it all happen and feel helpless. It's in a man's soul to fix things, and it is heartbreaking when he can't fix this. Take a step back and look at everything I mentioned thus far. Consider watching it all unfold to the woman you love, and watch her turn into someone you don't know. I'm sure plenty of men may start to distance themselves, bury themselves in work, and try to escape through video games or pornography, or they may decide to leave their wife and kids. Like I said, men already find it hard to talk about their feelings. Now his wife has all these really intense feelings, and he is more or less taking the brunt of it all. So where is he supposed to go about his feelings about all of this? Men usually think that hiding their feelings means that they're strong, and talking to someone about how they feel is weak.
And I just want to say, my husband is so strong. PPD has turned the first 3 years of our marriage into an awful trial, and we have come a far way in that time, and we are truly stronger because of it. He has supported me through so much, and there's no way that I could get by without him. He is incredible, and I could make a whole video about why I love him so much, but I will leave it there.
If you have experienced postpartum depression in any way, I hope this video helps you to feel seen and understood. You are not a bad mom for going through this.
I promise you, you can do it. It's like the work of labor, just way longer.